What's up guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to make sure your tenants pay the rent and they keep paying rent on time. I'm Kohan and let's go ahead and get right into the video. Alright, so let me start it off with a quick story from one of my friends who's a brand new real estate investor, just bought his property a month ago, and he is house hacking and he got 2 roommates as tenants, okay? So I have some roommates. Getting roommates, if you don't get the right ones or if you're not on the right terms with them in the very beginning, can be difficult because they live with you. But that doesn't really matter at the end of the day. As we go into this, when you're trying to be a good landlord and make sure your tenants pay rent, first and foremost, you need to think about your real estate as a business, okay? Your tenants are first and foremost your clients, and they are not your friends. And first and foremost, their job, you're selling them the service of living in your property, and in return for that, they have to pay you rent to live in your place. It's just cut and dry. If they sign the agreement, the lease agreement, to pay a certain amount of rent at a certain period of time, that's their obligation, and it's your obligation to make sure they stay with their contractual agreements. Now, it is really easy for new landlords and new people that are not as experienced in real estate, not as experienced in business, to go off and start treating this like it's not a business and they're their friends and they want to help people, okay? That's all right, but the problem is that you're actually doing your tenants a disservice by allowing them to mess up their priorities, okay? Their first priority, first and foremost, is to make sure they have a roof over their head. And when you don't enforce payment of rent, they then think that they don't have to pay and they start doing other silly things with their money, which is a problem for you and for them. Because at the end of the day, if you're not happy, they're going to have to go and they're not going to have a place to stay, and you're not going to be happy because you don't have any rent. Okay, so now let's get into how you actually make sure your tenants pay rent in the very beginning and how you make sure they keep paying rent for the life that they are with you in your properties. So the first thing to do, especially, is start at the very beginning when you meet them and when you start the relationship, okay? Usually when you get a tenant, they are gonna have either come in from a referral from somebody else or from an online ad or something like that. You're gonna have interviewed them, and then the key moment here is when you go to sign your lease and to pay the rent for the first time, the first month's rent, security deposit, or whatever terms you have set up. You need to either, sit down with them in person and go over the lease and go over the expectations. In fact, I would actually make, in addition to the lease, a separate, simple sheet of the expectations of being here and living in your property and what you expect people to do, like a tenant expectations sheet. It may sound kind of crazy, but your tenants, they have to be trained, right? They have no experience with you as a landlord, and you need to educate them as to what your expectations of them as are a tenant and what you expect them to do as being their landlord and having a tenant-landlord relationship with them. Because if you set up really good expectations at the beginning, the likelihood that they're going to mess around and not pay rent or go down substantially if you set hard and fast rules in the beginning with them that you are not going to tolerate late payment of rent. You are going to charge them late fees. You are going to knock on their door and you're going to evict them or have other stuff if they don't pay the rent. Okay, now obviously keep in mind whatever your local laws are and everything like that when going through this process and setting the correct expectations. But you need to, ideally, if you do it on the front end, you're never going to have to do that, right? All the problems of real estate come as a result of not screening your tenants properly and not setting the correct expectations from them in the very beginning. If you can do those things, you are going to avoid 99% of the problems associated with rental properties. So here's what you're going to do in practice, okay? When you go with your tenant, whether they're going to be your roommate, whether they're going to be in a property in their own unit, you're going to sit down with them or explain to them in person or over the phone before they sign, before they pay you, and you're going to go through the lease. You're going to go through, hey, rent is due in this amount. You have to pay $1,000 a month. The rent is due by the first of the month, okay? And then you tell them, even if your lease says, like, for example, in my leases, the rent is due at the first of the month. It is not technically late until the 6th of the month. So if they are paid by the 5th, they don't have to pay any late fees. But if they don't pay by the 5th and they pay on the 6th, it's a $60 late fee, all right? Or $50 late fee rather. And how I charge that is actually with Rent Redi rental management software. Link in the description if you want a super easy way to automatically collect rent and charge late fees and send your tenants reminders automatically without you ever having to get involved. Hit the link in the description. Use code Dan20 for the best rental management property software out there. Guys, if you liked the video so far, go ahead and hit the like button down below to keep me encouraged to come up with more stories for you. So with that, you tell your tenants, hey, the rent is due by the 1st of the month. If it is not due by the 1st of the month, we are going to have problems. You will be charged late fees. You will be, given notices to pay or leave, things like that, okay? You need, whatever your local laws are, I'm not an attorney, go check your local stuff, right? But you need to set very clear expectations that you will not tolerate non-payment of rent, okay? The rent must be paid by this day, and if that doesn't happen, this is gonna happen, and you're gonna be charged these late fees, and I will charge them, or you will have to go, all right? Nobody wants to have to move. Nobody wants to have to, not live in the place, but they do need to know that if they don't pay rent, that there will be consequences, and that you, more importantly, you will enforce the consequences. One thing that a lot of people do probably is they don't treat their real estate like a business, and they want to be, friends with their tenants, and they want to have, and that's fine. You can be friendly with your tenants. In fact, I encourage you to have a good relationship with your tenants. You need to be a good landlord, but you don't want to put the friendship above the fact that you're in a business, if that makes any sense, right? More importantly than you having a good relationship with them is that they pay and that you get paid for the service that you are providing them, which is housing. Okay, so now that you've set the ground expectations, you need to be very firm with them on the front end. If they feel like they can push you around, or that they can, do something you don't want to do and you're not going to do anything about it, they may just go and do that. Because, and so if they try to do that, you have to come at them very fast after the infraction is made and enforce the expectations that you lay down. Because if you don't, they are going to effectively walk all over you, and you need to do it as fast as possible. You cannot let these things fester, because the longer you let them fester, the more people think they can get away with stuff, and then they will do that. If you let somebody be late for a month, and they're 3 days late, 5 days late, 10 days, 15 days late, and you don't ever say anything about it, they will be 15 days late every month after that forever, okay? Because you let it happen the first time, and so then in their mind they're like, oh, landlord let me pay rent late one time, he'll probably let me pay rent other times. But if you go in and he's, a day late or 2 days late, and you're, blasting him on his phone and be like, hey dude, why isn't the rent late? Rent's due, you're gonna get this late fee if you don't pay rent. He'll make sure he pays rent on time, all right? People, if you screen your tenants properly, they're gonna have the means to pay the rent on time. It's just a matter of their own decisions to allocate the funds to the things that matter in their life, like necessities like food and rent and vehicles and stuff like that, or non-necessities like all of the silly things that people buy and the reasons they don't have the money for you. And when they start giving you a bunch of excuses, you tell them, hey, it doesn't matter, all right, go get a payday loan, get your credit card, you can pay rent on Rent Redi with the credit card, 30-day interest-free loan, all right, or whatever. You figure out how to get the money. I don't care what you do, rent is due. And when you take this when you take this attitude that I won't, you don't tolerate excuses, that you will enforce late fees, that you will make sure the rent is paid, it magically, people figure out how to pay, because it becomes a high priority in their life, and people are extremely resourceful, even though they make a lot of excuses sometimes. They're extremely resourceful, and if you make this a mandatory, no questions asked type of deal, I can guarantee you they will figure out how to do it. All right, and to finish up my point with an awesome example here from the same story as before, at the beginning of the video, my friend that he had his 2 roommates, and basically he's house hacking a property, just bought a property, it's him and a couple friends living there, and they moved in, and he was, generous with them, and he's like, oh, they're on, hard times or whatever, and I'm gonna let them, move in without paying rent, and I'm going to, let them get over their financial problems, and then they can pay rent at the 1st of the month, right? He let them, it was the 1st of the month, I think they moved in like 10 days before, and he's like, okay, I'll give you 10 free days, so that way you can, get paid again, and that way you can afford the relatively low rent to live here, right? And so what he did is they moved in, right? They moved into the place, 1st of the month rolls around, both of them, no rent in sight, okay? None of them paid rent, and my friend, he's brand new to this, it's okay, he's learning, but like he did not, jump on them immediately and make sure they paid. Okay, and so what happened? They didn't pay, and they just kept not paying. And so then, a few days later, he's like, sitting there like, I gotta get them to pay there, but they're making these excuses, all this and that, yada, yada, yada. Comes to me, and I'm like, hey dude, you need to get on these guys, because if you let this happen, they're not gonna pay. But if you get on them, like I just taught you in the first part of the video, they will find ways to do it. And so, sure enough, a few days later, he's like, hey dude, basically they're in a tight court. I mean, it's not a comfortable situation. These will be hard situations. You will feel they're not going to be pleasant, all right, but they are necessary to ensure that your business is profitable and that your tenants have a place to live and that everybody's happy, all right? Because the last thing that a person needs is to get evicted or to get kicked out of a place, and the last thing that you need is to be losing money every month paying your mortgage and all the expenses without any rent coming in to cover those costs. So anyway, he goes to his roommates, his tenants, and he's like, hey, the rent is due by this date. I've given you a ton of grace. I've given you weeks of free rent. I need the rent now. The rent needs to be paid by this date. I think it was like a couple days after he basically put his foot down and was like, I don't care what your problems are. The rent needs to be hit. And both of them, magically, and he's like, hey, because it's late, you're gonna have to pay late fees too, like I told you before. And so sure enough, a couple days later, a day later, rent's not paid. He's on him again, hitting him up, like, hey, what's the problem here? What is the deal? And it's like, I told you what needed to be done. You said you were gonna have it, and you don't. What's the deal? And so, hammering on him again, and the next day, magically, through Rent Redi, that he got them both set up on, he made sure that they were in, the rent is magically paid, even though his tenants, their financial problems, and this, and yada, 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 everything's more important than having a roof over my head. Well, not anymore. So when he hardballed them, when he's like, this is not, you're either gonna pay or your stuff's gonna be out on the curb, then they figured out how to solve their financial problems and paid the rent, okay? And so that story is just to illustrate my point that you cannot be lenient with people. You cannot, you have to treat this business like a business and not like a hobby. First and foremost, your tenants are your tenants. They are not your friends. And you need to make sure that everyone's meeting their agreements. I hope you got some value from that video. If you did, hit the like button down below, subscribe for more content, comment below if you disagree with me or you agree with me, and click the links in the videos right here to see more of my content, and I will see you guys in the next chapter.